Alright, meat shields, listen up, because we've got a f***ing banger coming your way. Tell me, what could be worse than a bunch of banjo-playing squares showing up at your party uninvited? Oh, I don't know, maybe if they turned out to be bloodthirsty vampires who started hunting everyone down for sport, maybe? Yeah, but this is so much more than just a vampire movie. It's an amazing story that actually makes you care when the characters get ripped to shreds. And it all builds up to one of the craziest final battles that you'll ever see. So get ready, because we're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Irish Dracula in Sinners. This kid's about to give attracting the wrong crowd an entirely new meaning. It's just after sunrise when this guitarist, Sammy here, pulls up outside of his father's church. Whatever happened last night, it looks like he just got back from the craziest bender of his life, but the claw marks across his face tell a completely different story. You see, it all started yesterday, when his older cousins, the Smokestack twins, came back to town. Now these two are basically the coolest guys around, and they've got big plans to turn an old sawmill into the most poppin' juke joint that Clarksdale has ever seen. But as usual, someone's always trying to keep them down. You see, this is Mississippi in 1932, and if you know anything about what life was like back then you know exactly what kind of a-holes these guys are up against. Specifically, this landowner Hogwood here. But after showing him that they're packing more than just a fat bag of cash, he changes up his tune pretty quick. Now, Sammy has a big night ahead of him because he's supposed to be playing guitar at the Twins' Juke for its grand opening. The kid looks up to his cousins because they've been making it big in Chicago, but Smokey explains that deep down they face the same problems everywhere they go, and Chicago ain't but Mississippi with tall buildings instead of plantations. Which is why they've finally decided to make their way back home. Alright, if you've ever tried to throw the most absolute lit party that you possibly could, like the Twins here, then you know how hard it can be to stop the local Karens from shutting you down. But trust me, these guys have it so much worse. You see, Sammy here is a young sharecropper living in the Mississippi Delta, where every day he has to work long hours in the field for a share of the crop, minus the cost of tools, seed, and rent, of course. Basically, it was a way of keeping his family in constant debt to the landowners so that they could never really actually achieve economic freedom. So for Sammy, playing the guitar is more than just a hobby, it's like a chance to finally escape from poverty. Now, Smoke here made a smart observation when he noticed that Hogwood had cleaned the barn's floor, and when he pointed it out, the man spit on the ground right in front of them. What this tells us is that Hogwood didn't clean it for them, he cleaned it because he has something to hide. And the vultures circling over the lake might be a sign that he's a lot more dangerous than they think. In 1930s Mississippi, they lived under the Jim Crow laws that forced racial segregation, meaning they could be beaten, locked up, or killed just for looking at a white person in the wrong way, and the police wouldn't do anything to stop it. That's why even just purchasing some land from this guy had Smoke here stressed beyond belief. Like, maybe they could have tried using their contracts from Chicago to form a shell company and purchased the property that way, or even claimed the land was for a church if they wanted to be more low-key. But the fact that they even have to do that just goes to show how bad things really were. It's honestly really sad to know that this was going on all over the country less than 100 years ago. And even though the twins seem like they can handle it, they have no idea that the other humans are just the start of their problems. Okay, boom. The gang has some work to do before the party starts, and worried that they're running late, Smoke takes the truck into town for some last-minute supplies. This leaves Sammy to ride along with his smooth-talking cousin Stack, and they've got an even more important job, because now it's time to get the band back together. If his brother Stack is the brains of the operation, then Smoke here is the muscle, and after keeping them both alive in the literal trenches of war, he's more than prepared for the hustle and bustle of small-town Clarksdale. Noticing that the street looks extra busy today, he pays one of the neighborhood girls to keep an eye on his truck. As expected, he hasn't even been in the store for 2 minutes before he hears the girl laying on his horn, and spots two small-time crooks stealing his beer. So he does what any sensible person would do and pulls out the tool and shoots one of them straight in the ass. When the dude turns back around, it turns out that these two actually know each other, and now he's all apologetic after seeing that he messed with the wrong guy. But it still isn't enough to save his friend from taking a bullet to the knee, because Smoke knows that he can't have anyone talking about how they almost robbed the twins. Smoke heads back inside and pays his good friend Bo Chow, the store owner, to make sure that the guys he just shot can get patched up. When it comes to the party tonight, they've got the food and drinks covered, but now all they need is a sign to make it official. And Bo's wife, Grace, agrees to whip one up. On the other side of town, Sammy and Stack make their first stop at the train station, where they come up on legendary local performer Delta Slim. Now, Slim here knows that his time is worth money, and it takes some persuading to make him ditch his reliable nightclub gig and come play music at the twins' juke, but after offering him double the cash, plus an unlimited supply of genuine Irish beer, they're finally able to get him on board to tickle the ivories tonight at the function. In fact, just a minute later, he's playing the blues right along with Sammy like they've known each other their entire lives. And as a crowd gathers around to enjoy the show, Stack announces that there's more music, drinking, partying, and gambling on the way down at the old sawmill when their juke opens later on that night. Before they hit the road, Preacher Boy sees a face that he's seen before, and almost as if by fate, introduces himself to Perline, a famous local singer. And unfortunately for Sammy here, she's married. But you can't blame the guy for shooting a shot. Of course, when you're as flashy as Stack here, you're gonna attract some unwanted attention, and that's when his old sweetheart, Mary, comes up to confront him. Oh, she's furious at him for ghosting her after leaving for the war, and he tries to pretend like the two of them were never serious in the first place, but the truth is that he really does care a lot more than he's letting on. Okay, you know it's bad when Smoke has to literally pop a cap in someone's ass before the party has even started. No matter how careful they are, it seems like these guys can't even stop in the store for more than 5 minutes without somebody trying to rob them. And there's obviously no police around to stop it. Plus, if he tried to report the crime, then he would probably be accused of something and end up in jail himself, and that's especially true when you realize they were stealing his beer. In 1932, the United States had prohibition laws making it illegal to sell, make, or transport alcoholic drinks anywhere in the country, meaning those bottles are as valuable as solid gold. I mean, nobody's going to show up to the party if there's no beer, right? So without it, the juke joint would be dead on the first night. Now, with that being said, because everything that they're doing is so illegal, it's important for them to keep an incredibly low profile. But between Smoke shooting 2 guys in broad daylight, his brother announcing their plans to everyone at the damn train station, and Sammy here hitting on a married woman, they're not exactly doing a great job, but they can't throw a party if they don't spread the word. Now, one of their best options could be through their friends the Chows. In many parts of the Mississippi Delta, Chinese Americans owned more than 90% of the grocery stores, serving both the black and white communities. This makes their store the perfect base to hand out invites and flyers while making sure that the party crashers don't find out. I'd even change words on the flyer like party to juke, or religious words like revival or Bible study. That way only people in the know would get the message. They could even have Sammy here try and spreading the word through his father's church, because back in the day, churches were basically like the town group chat, making it a perfect place to get the word out without attracting any unwanted attention. Now, speaking of that, it might not be too bad of an idea to spread the rumor that there's a big illegal party happening somewhere else. You know, as a way to throw off the authorities off their scent. But the truth is that the cops are actually the least of their worries, and nothing could prepare them for what's about to show up at the door. The squad's next stop is a cotton field where they find their old friend Cornbread working hard to meet his quota. He's a prominent member of the community who's going to be working the door at Club Juke tonight, even if he doesn't know it yet. But Stack here works his usual magic, and it doesn't take long before they've got their bouncer. Now, they're not the only ones catching up with ghosts from the past. His brother Smoke has a personal job in town that's been long overdue. After finishing up in town, he stops by to visit his estranged wife, Annie, who he hasn't spoken to in years. They drifted apart after their infant daughter tragically passed away, and it made him lose faith in anything except for money and power. But Annie here still follows the old ways and believes that her prayers have been keeping the twins safe. He knows that what he did was wrong, and as much as it hurts to admit it, he's finally worked up the courage to say that he's sorry. But tonight, those prayers are about to be put to the test. Meanwhile, at a small farmhouse somewhere out on the edge of town, a raggedy-looking man appears to drop right out of the sky, looking back at something over his shoulder as he staggers towards the door. His back is covered in painful-looking blisters, and he's literally sizzling like a damn chicken fajita until he's able to get out of the sun, explaining to this couple that he's being hunted by a group of Choctaw Indians, and offering to pay the couple in gold coins if they can keep him safe. When the hunters show up a few minutes later, the leader tries to warn Joan here that they don't have much time. But she tells him to beat it without taking his advice, and that right there was her biggest mistake. It's getting late and the hunters leave in a hurry before the sun goes down, but strangely, when she goes back inside, there's no sign of her husband. As a matter of fact, the entire house is dead silent except for the sound of a rocking chair creaking against the floorboards. But when she pokes her head into the back room to see what happened, she finds the stranger with his mouth covered in blood, and her husband lying face down on the floor. All of a sudden, her husband stands back up with his teeth transformed into razor-sharp fangs, and there's nothing that she can do but scream as he turns to come after her next, making 2 down with 10 more to go. Alright, just when it seemed like things in this town couldn't get any worse, these two had to go and let Dracula's Irish cousin here play them like some damn fools. Well, it couldn't have happened to a better couple, and by that, I don't mean that you were both good people, I mean you both totally deserved it. But if one thing's for sure, it looks like you two just f***ed up. Now, to be perfectly fair, right, nobody goes about their day expecting a damn vampire to show up at their door, but this guy couldn't have been more suspicious if he was still wearing handcuffs. Maybe you missed the fact that he's literally smoking from being in the sunlight, his mouth looks like it's full of blood, and he's covered in third-degree burns. But as soon as he mentioned who was after him, that's when you should have realized that something truly dangerous was going on. You said yourselves that the Choctaw hunters hadn't been in the area for many years. Well, that's because most of them were forcibly resettled all the way back out in Oklahoma in the 1830s, and the ones who were still around would never risk interacting with idiots like you unless they had a damn good reason to do it. So, either those hunters traveled literally hundreds of miles just to kill this guy, or they're risking being caught and kicked off their land. But whatever he did, it must have been really bad to get them so angry. Plus, if he only managed to get away with nothing but the clothes on his back, then how the hell did they miss his pocket full of gold coins? Unless he was hiding them somewhere that you don't want to know. And in that case, I would just tell him to keep the damn money. That right there was your sign to shut the door in his face and let nature take its course. But as soon as he saw you two had that new Yeezy merch in your closet, if you know what I mean, he knew that you were dumb enough to fall for anything. Those hunters weren't trespassing, they were trying to save your damn lives, and if you weren't so blinded by your racism, they could have saved you and everyone else in town from what's about to happen. But thanks to these idiots, this guy's about to wipe out half of Clarksdale in just a matter of hours, and now there's nothing that anyone can do to stop it. So, on behalf of everyone who lives there, thanks a lot, you couple of saltines, because it looks like you two just up. Now it's officially time to kick things off at Club Juke, but it doesn't take long before the twins run into some trouble. Smoke only wants the bar to take real cash, and some of the guests are trying to pay with plantation coins. But Stack insists that they need to put up with it so that everybody feels welcome. They've got their hands full already, so when Mary shows up and starts looking for his cousin, Sammy steps in and tries to show her the door, only to find out that Mary's mother raised Stack and Smoke like they were her own sons. Stack eventually comes to throw her out, but it's not because he wants to. Being honest for the first time, he confesses that he's always been in love with her, but he knows that pushing her away is all that he can do to keep her safe. Now that Delta Slim has the crowd all warmed up, it's time for Sammy here to finally show off his stuff. And getting everyone's attention, he calls the kid to join him up on stage. Grabbing his guitar, Sammy starts playing a song that he wrote for his father, and it's some of the most powerful blues music that anyone has ever heard. In fact, the crowd joins in, and the energy in the room becomes almost magical and opens up a doorway through time itself, as the spirits of Sammy's ancestors, both past and future, come to add their own music to the party. But the truth is that they're not the only ones who are listening. Outside, the vampire and his new followers are drawn in by Sammy's musical and spiritual talent, and it doesn't take long before he decides that he wants that power for himself. Now, Cornbread here can tell that these three look like trouble from a mile away, and he quickly sends for the twins when he sees them approaching the door. The leader introduces himself as Remick, claiming that the three are a traveling band from North Carolina, and asks if they can come inside for a warm meal. Everyone at the door is a serious business person, and after considering what the optics would be like of having white people at the function, Remick here promises that they aren't looking for trouble, offering more money and not wanting to take no for an answer. That's when Smoke reaches for the blicky, and even then he says that they'll be camped up out on the road just in case they change their minds. Of course, Stack here thinks that it was a mistake to turn away paying customers, but his brother knows better, because even if they promise not to cause any problems, the simple act of letting them in would be dangerous for everybody else. There are so many people on the dance floor, and it looks like they should be rolling in the cash, but the problem is, most of them are paying with the plantation credits, and at this rate, the twins will be broke in a matter of weeks. As if that wasn't bad enough, Mary finally pieces together that the twins made all their money by stealing from rival gangs back in the Chicago area, specifically beer from the Irish and wine from the Italians, making it even more important for their nightclub business to become a success. Now, Mary knows that the strangers will be more willing to trust her, so she offers to go and find out just how much these traveling musicians have to offer. And Stack reluctantly agrees to the idea, giving her his pistol just in case they try anything funny. Alright, as usual, Smoke's instincts were spot on, but he has no idea just how right he really is. The only reason they're even considering letting Remick and his group inside is because they're short on dinero, but with that being said, inviting him in would obviously be a huge mistake. Of course, we already know that they're vampires, but even for regular people, there was something else about them that just didn't add up. Now, as a white Irish banjo group who say that they're from North Carolina, you'd expect them to play something like Appalachian or Irish folk songs, but instead, they chose to play Pick Poor Robin Clean, a song originally recorded by a black blues artist named Geeshie Wiley. It's like they heard the music from outside and then deliberately chose to play blues as a way to manipulate them, but couldn't get it right because it didn't come from the soul, which just adds to the reasons of why they can't be trusted. Plus, like Smoke pointed out, there are plenty of other establishments more their style right down the road, so the fact that these three random white people are so dead set on getting inside their juke is incredibly sus, no matter how you look at it. Now, obviously, their decision to not let them in was the best choice that they could have made because everyone knows that vampires can't enter private property unless they're directly invited inside. But even without knowing that they're all a bunch of bloodsuckers, Smoke's right to want to keep them out. If anything happened between them and one of their customers, the police would immediately be on their side even without any actual proof. So, if they wanted to be extra careful, they could make an announcement that there was a group of sketchy white people hanging around down the road, warning guests to stay away from them. That way, they'd at least have a fighting chance as they left the party. Now, as long as they refuse to let them in, they'll all be perfectly safe, but the moment that anybody steps out that door, they're gonna be as good as dead, and that's why what Mary's about to do here is such a terrible idea. Although they're losing out on money for tonight, Smoke mentions that they still have about 2 months before they're completely out of cash. So instead of resorting to dealing with Remick and his squad, they should just take the L for now and work out a system where they either stop taking plantation coins or find a way to trade them at the company stores for useful supplies like groceries to keep the juke up and running. Then they wouldn't have to risk any trouble with Remick and his friends, but they won't really be able to fight back until they actually know what they're up against, and unfortunately, that's something they're gonna have to learn the hard way. Mary doesn't really have to go far before she comes across the man and his friends posted up on a log jamming just down the road. Sitting down, she politely cuts to the chase and asks to have a solid look at the paper. But instead of good old US dollars, this dude gives her a handful of solid gold coins. By now, Mary can tell that there's something seriously weird going on with these people, and suddenly Remick's eyes begin to glow as he starts leaning down to bite her neck. Reacting quickly, she pulls out the Draco and tells him to get to steppin', but the moment that she turns her back to walk inside, the monster suddenly takes flight and attacks before she even knows what hit her, making 3 down with 9 more to go. Now that the elder kindred have Mary under their control, she's able to walk right into the party without being questioned, because Cornbread here obviously doesn't think twice about letting her inside. A minute later, Delta Slim steps out for some fresh air, so Cornbread asks him to watch the door while he goes to take a leak, never suspecting that it's the last time he'll ever be seen alive. He wanders off down the road just far enough to get some privacy, until suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appears out of the shadows right behind him, and just like Mary, he's taken by surprise before he even has a chance to react, making 4 down with 8 more to go. Now, meanwhile, back inside, they're all too distracted to notice Mary pulling Stack away from the eyes of the crowd. At the same time, Smoke sends Sammy to find his brother for some help breaking up a fight, but by the time that they get there, it's already too late. Opening the door, they're both horrified to see Mary curled over Stack's body as she's violently tearing at his throat. Noticing that she's been busted, Mary gets up, mouth covered in blood, and starts trying to explain herself. But Smoke doesn't hesitate to dual wield and dumps every shot but one straight into her chest. The party people are shook, and everything suddenly goes quiet as the shots ring out. But then, a second later, Mary just stands back up, laughing as she pushes past Smoke's last bullet and escapes back out into the night. Now, to call this moment heartbreaking would be an understatement, as Smoke rushes to his brother's side. And knowing that there's nothing that he can do, he tells Stack that he loves him one last time before he finally dies from the injuries. So, unfortunately, I gotta say it, that makes 5 down with 7 more to go. Now, after seeing this, Delta Slim immediately tells everyone that it's time to hit the road and go home, never realizing that he's just sent them all out there to be slaughtered. The gang is still trying to piece together what the hell even happened, but Annie here knows that there has to be more to the story. Asking Sammy for more details, she learns that Mary said, "We are gonna kill all of you," and that word makes all the difference. To her, it's obvious that they've been attacked by something supernatural, like possibly an evil spirit known as a haint, and although it hurts to say it, she wants to get Stack's body outside before things can get any worse. But Smoke refuses to let them anywhere near his brother, still coming to terms with the unthinkable. As for the Chows, Grace reminds Bo that, with all due respect, now would be a good time to say their goodbyes and head back into town. After all, their daughter is probably wondering where the hell they are, and sends Bo to get the car ready with no idea that the vamps are still out there. But the minute that he leaves the barn, he's already as good as dead, making 6 down with 6 more to go. Whoa, okay, well damn, Meat Shields, it looks like Count Freakula just struck again. Their friends never had a chance to see it coming, but now that they've witnessed an attack for themselves, they can finally start doing something about it, even if they're a little bit off when it comes to what they're fighting. One thing that's important to know about Annie here is that she practices hoodoo, a traditional African-American form of folk magic that was created and passed down by her ancestors. This kind of makes Annie like their secret weapon, so if they want to survive, then they better start listening to what she has to say. Now, Annie thinks they're facing off against something called a haint, a type of evil spirit from southern folklore that targets the living and possesses their bodies. That might be a little different from a vampire, but at least it's a step in the right direction, and now they can start using her skills and knowledge to fight back. First off, the moment she realized something was outside the barn and hunting them, they should have told anyone who was left to stay inside, because they're going to need as many meat shields as they can get. It was already too late to save about 90% of the guests, but they completely forgot about Bo and Grace. And if they'd at least been able to warn her husband in time, then they'd have one less threat to face later. For now though, they need to keep that door locked up tight until sunrise, because they have to assume that anyone out there has already been corrupted, so they don't want anyone else coming in or out. Although vampires and haints are completely different, some of the protective magic that Annie practices can actually work against both types of creatures. One of the simplest methods is by placing salt lines along the doorways and windowsills, which usually works as a barrier against most types of harmful spirits. So, if I were them, that's where I would start. Pieces of iron sometimes work in the same way, so if they have any nails or horseshoes lying around, now would be a good time to start placing them near any entrances for an extra layer of protection. But would any of that actually do much to stop a vampire? Probably not if we're being real, but as long as they don't let any of them inside, then they should be safe. So, like Annie pointed out, their most important job is to take care of Stack's body. Because if he turns while he's still inside, then they're all completely screwed. Now, Smoke may not agree with it, but she needs to explain that it's the only way to keep everyone safe. Otherwise, they're gonna be in for a rude awakening when he gets up and starts chewing on people's necks. Ouch. Now, since Smoke won't let anyone take Stack's body outside, Annie respectfully locks him inside the closet instead and asks Sammy to watch over him. Just then, Cornbread comes strolling up for the first time since he disappeared and starts acting like he has absolutely no idea what the hell's been going on. But it doesn't take long before Annie sees straight through his bullshit. Strangely, the guy refuses to step past the doorway unless somebody specifically invites him inside. But now that the cat's out of the bag, nobody is foolish enough to fall for his tricks. Outsmarted, it looks like he's about to leave, but that's when he remembers that he hasn't been paid yet and starts holding out his hand just beyond the edge of the door. Although the others say not to trust him, Smoke reaches into his pocket and pulls out the cash. But just as he goes to put it in his hand, the vampire suddenly grabs his arm and drags him outside. Within a split second, Smoke takes out his weapon and fires a shot straight through the monster's face. But now he's flat on his stomach and caught outside the safety of the barn. Rushing after him, Annie drags him back inside just as Cornbread gets up to attack again, slamming the door in his face as the monster stands there looking frustrated on the other side. Everybody's badly shaken up, but as if things weren't bad enough already, that's when they hear somebody knocking on the closet door. It's Stack. And he starts trying to convince his brother to let him out, pretending like he's suddenly feeling all better. The others know better than to trust him, and the more frustrated that he gets, he starts slamming on the other side harder and harder, until finally, he just crashes straight through the door and lands directly on top of Sammy. They would all be screwed right now if it wasn't for Annie, who comes running back just in time to throw a jar of pickled garlic straight in his face. And as the creature runs away shouting in pain, she realizes exactly what they're facing off against, telling the others that Remick and his followers are actually a clan of vampires. Grace here wants to go outside and look for her husband, but the others know that she'll be dead as soon as she hits the door, so they convince her to hunker down with everyone here at the Juke and wait until sunrise. Taking the lead, Annie has everyone collect as many vampire fighting supplies as they can find, explaining that they can only be killed by the sun or a stake through the heart. Smoke asks if eliminating the leader can save his brother, but she explains that it's already too late once you've been infected, and the only way to help them is by killing them all one at a time, making him promise that he'll do the same for her in case she's ever bitten. Heyo! Now we're talking. It looks like they finally figured out what Remick and his buddies really are. So now that they know the truth, it's time to update their strat. Annie's spot on about one thing because everyone knows that the best ways to kill a vampire are with daylight or a wooden stake, but there might still be a few other methods that they're overlooking. First is straight up decapitation, which some stories say can stop the vampire from reanimating after it's been killed. On a symbolic level, it breaks the connection between the vampire's body and soul, but from a more practical standpoint, severing the brain from the spinal cord completely eliminates control over their motor functions, leaving them with no way to physically attack. Now, one thing they have going for them is a healthy supply of firearms, but we know that shots to the body will only slow them down. With that being said, they have a few large caliber rifles that should be powerful enough to achieve the same effects as a decapitation with a well-placed hit. So, from now on, they should focus on aiming for the head whenever possible and trying to make the most out of every weapon that they have. A machete, axe, or a sharpened shovel could also do the trick, but then of course you'd have to get in close enough to do the job. Besides that, even a better option is to try using fire because it destroys the vampire's body on a cellular level faster than their regeneration powers can keep up with. Here at the club, they have dozens of bottles of corn liquor, which is definitely flammable enough to use for Molotov cocktails, giving them an extremely powerful weapon that they can launch at the vampires from a long range. Now, Annie has them off to a good start by by gathering garlic, silver, and wooden stakes just in case they have to fight, but as things stand, they're still protected by the fact that the vampires can't come past the threshold without an invite. So all they really have to do is stay locked inside the barn, and they should stay safe until the morning. The only problem is it's never that simple. One of a vampire's greatest powers is the ability to manipulate your mind, and Smoke almost fell for it twice since this whole thing started. So right now they need to make a pact not to open the door again until morning no matter who shows up outside. As long as they keep the vampires out, surviving until sunrise should be easy, but of course their buddy Remick here, he's still got a few more tricks up his sleeve. While they're searching the place for more gear, Pearline stumbles across a body that they haven't noticed before, and they immediately drag the guy outside before he turns. With a mysterious new dead body appearing in the barn, the survivors begin to worry that there could still be a vampire hiding amongst them, so Annie comes up with a plan to find out. Taking out a gar of garlic, she passes it around and tells each person to take a bite. Last in the circle is Delta Slim, and to everyone's shock, he starts choking as soon as the garlic hits his mouth. But he's finally able to pull it together and lock in, saying that all the fancy Irish beer must have messed up his stomach. Now they're starting to second guess what happened, and going back to where they found the body, they realize that it wasn't blood on the floor after all, the man was just passed out in a puddle of wine. At that exact moment, the man wakes up outside and starts begging the others to let him in, and realizing that the man was just passed out, they open the door and Cornbread takes him down and sinks his fangs into the man's throat. That's when Grace's husband Beau comes walking out of the shadows and tells her that it's time to go home. But seeing that the usual tricks aren't going to cut it, the leader himself decides that it's time to join the negotiations. Remick appears and promises that they can all live together like one big happy family if they would just let him inside. But if not, then they'll have to pay a visit to the woman's daughter, who is all alone back at the grocery store. It turns out that the vampires can now see each other's memories, and to prove it, he starts speaking in Chinese about things that only Beau would know. Just like that, he's got them trapped between two impossible decisions, but he decides to offer them another way out. You see, it's not all of them that he's interested in, it's just Sammy, and his gift to create a bridge to the spirit world with his music. Remick has been dead a long time, and he craves community and longs to see his ancestors through the power of music. If they hand over Preacher Boy, the vampires promise that he'll let everybody go, but his friends would rather die than let the monsters take him. Turning on Smoke, he reveals that their juke was destined to fail right from the start because Hogwood and his racist buddies were just waiting out until the morning before they came to kill the twins and steal all their money, but the others drag him back inside just before he's about to break, with the vampires knowing that it's only a matter of time before somebody cracks. The meeting has Smoke so badly shaken up that he can hardly think straight, but Grace here has officially decided that she has had enough. She's not about to sit back and wait for the vampires to go after her daughter, or anyone else in the town for that matter, and she wants Smoke and the others to help her fight these bloodsuckers before they've killed even more of their friends. The problem is that the others still want to wait until the morning, but that's when they hear the hum of every vampire's voice joined together to the tune of Geishy Wildly's Pick Poor Robin Clean as they all surround the building. Grace tries covering her eyes to block the sound of her husband's voice, but she's horrified to discover that she can still hear him singing inside her own head. Reaching her breaking point, she grabs a steak from the table as she rushes for the door, and Smoke tries to cover her mouth as he realizes what's about to happen. But she bites his hand and shouts for the vampires to come on in, you mother, which is when all hell finally breaks loose. Oh, wow. Alright, now that right there was one of the dumbest things that she could have possibly done. I mean, I totally get why Grace here was freaking out, but if her goal was to put up a decent fight, then this was definitely not the movie. Remick thought that he put them in checkmate when he mentioned going after her daughter, but this is that classic vampire manipulation that I was talking about earlier. He wanted her to panic and make a bad choice, but when you think about it, there was one major flaw in his plan that they could have tried to take advantage of first. Their daughter, Lisa, might be watching the store by herself, but she's incredibly street street smart and would most likely never open the door this late at night for anyone except her parents. Now, they don't stand a chance at killing all of the vampires, but if they shifted their focus to only eliminating Beau, then they could have at least removed that threat from the board, so here's what I'm thinking. What they needed to do here was use the vampire's own powers against him by making him think that she was falling for the trick, using Grace to lure her husband into coming closer without actually inviting him inside. They'd probably take the bait since they almost had her earlier, but then as soon as he got close enough, somebody could throw a Molotov cocktail straight at Beau's feet, using it as a way to kill him without ever having to leave the safety of the barn. Now it looks like their only choice is to get ready for a fight to the death, but besides all of the weapons they've already prepared, there's one crazy idea that just might work. Earlier, the vampire mentioned that he wanted Sammy because his music could connect him with the spirits of his old friends and family, but maybe this works both ways. So while his friends get ready to fight the vampires, Sammy here should go ahead and grab his guitar and start playing on it like his life depended on it, trying to call on the spirits of his own ancestors to help them fight the vampires like the ultimate battle of the bands. Clearly, it's a huge long shot, but with 30 vampires about to knock down their door, they're gonna need all the help that they can get. The survivors stand there, bracing for the fight until Remick finally opens the door, and Grace immediately chucks a Molotov cocktail straight at his head, but he swats it away over his shoulder as the vampires begin to swarm inside. Charging forward, she goes straight for her husband, tackling him into the flames as she drives a stake deep into his heart, but she's burned to death in the chaos with no way for her friends to save her. Hitting the leader with a spray of garlic water, Annie realizes that the other vampires feel his pain, but as she turns to share this information with Smoke, that's when his own brother pounces on top of her and savagely plunges his fangs straight into her neck. Perline drives the vampire back with a bullet to the shoulder, but it's already too late to save her life. And rushing to her side, Smoke realizes that there's only one thing left for him to do. Heartbroken, he tells his wife that he loves her before picking up a stake and piercing it straight through her chest, knowing that it was the only way to save her from turning into one of the undead. He's too stunned to move, but Delta Slim runs over and pulls him back to his feet, hustling the survivors to the stairs and telling them to run while he holds off the vampires. Using himself as a distraction, he lets the monsters swarm him while his friends run to safety, going out like a true badass, so at least they'll have a chance to survive. But it's not over yet. Just as they reach the loft, Remick and Stack come bursting through the door, and the leader goes straight after Sammy, while the twins are locked in a battle to the death. There's no possible way to defeat them all, and as his cousins yell for him to run, Sammy dives out of a second-story door and starts limping towards the road. He doesn't make it far before Remick grabs his shoulder and sends him flying into a nearby lake. Meanwhile, back inside, the twins are still kicking the absolute shit out of each other until Stack finally gets the upper hand. But as he leans down to bite his brother's throat, he's suddenly repelled by one of the protective charms given to him by his wife, allowing Smoke to hit him with a reversal and reach for his stake. Just when the vampire thinks that he has them beat, Sammy begins reciting the Lord's Prayer, distracting Remick by reminding him that the men who stole his father's land forced those words upon him. All the while, slowly reaching for his guitar, he shatters it over the creature's head, leaving the silver resonator buried deep into the side of his skull. It's almost a death blow, but it's still not enough to take the creature down, until just at the last possible second, Smoke rushes in from behind and puts a stake straight through his heart, finally ending the vampire's reign of terror once and for all. A moment later, the sun rises up over the trees as the entire vampire horde suddenly bursts into flames, and their leader is engulfed in a fiery tornado as his body disintegrates into ash. They're the only two survivors from their night of horrors, and grateful that the kid is still alive, Smoke makes his cousin promise to live the quiet life from now on. Taking the keys to their car, Sammy travels back to his father's church where we found him at the beginning of the story, but as for Smoke, he still has some unfinished business to attend to. Like clockwork, Hogwood and his racist friends pull up thinking that they're about to catch him off guard, but that's when Smoke starts unloading on them from the tree line with a high-powered rifle, taking out a squad of racists before they even know what hit them. Pulling a grenade, he tosses it into a truck just as the last 3 survivors tried to speed off, but he's finally hit in the process, leaving him with a deadly wound to the gut. Knowing that he's about to die, he finds Hogwood bleeding in the dirt and finishes him off, and now that it's finally over, a vision of Annie appears with their baby daughter, welcoming him over to the other side. Now, as for Sammy, he never gave up on those dreams of becoming a musician, and 60 years later, he's an old man nearing the end of his career. One night after they've closed, the bouncer says that some people outside have offered some money to come inside and see him, and before he knows what happened, the bouncer has let Stack and Mary come walking into the club. It turns out that his brother was the only one that smoke couldn't kill, and he let him live as long as he promised to leave Sammy here alone. Well, now that he's an old man, the vampires came to offer him one more chance at eternal life, but Sammy says that he's seen enough of this place and is very satisfied with the life that he's lived. Stack abandons his plan and admits that over the years, he and Mary have collected every single album and are huge fans. Everything except the music he makes with the electric guitar, and asking Sammy if he still has the real in him, is extremely surprised to find his father's guitar restored and in working condition in Sammy's possession. After playing them one last song, he says goodbye to his cousin for the last time, but not before asking him if he still thinks of that day long ago at Club Juke. Pausing, Stack says that there's no doubt about that. It was the last time he saw his brother, the last time he saw the sun, and for just a few hours, everybody was free. Sinners! Yes! I had no idea that I needed a sexy vampire dance battle movie in my life, but holy shit, they pulled it off. It's like, finally, somebody remembers how to make a good movie. Even the post-credits sequence took an already great film and elevated it to perfection. And Remick, holy shit, greatest on-screen villain of the moment. The greatest villains in movies are the ones that truly believe that they're right. And, you know, Remick's story of why he did what he did was like, hey, I can relate. I want to see my homies too, and I definitely want to jam while I'm doing it. So from the How to Beat team, a major congratulations to everyone at Proximity Media for pulling off seemingly the impossible and creating possibly what's the best movie of the entire year. Triple salute. Now, with all the millions of people watching this movie, and with all that being said, there's probably a few different ways that we could have handled things in today's episode. So you gotta let me know down in the comments what that would have been if you would have done anything differently. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, leave a like and subscribe and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. I'm the guy. We'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.